Hello, internet friends, and welcome to episode number 164 of Final Boss TV. Today, as per almost usual, your WoW and Gay rating show, I'm your host. My name is Adam K, aka Bay, and today is the Legion Patch 735 Mage Ketchup show. We were going to have Hunters today, but due to scheduling and whatever, we had to flip-flop them, so Hunter should be next Sunday, and then depending on, again, when Battle for Azeroth wants to alpha, beta drop all over us, then we'll figure out if we're going to do a tank catch-up and a healer one, and then possibly, like, mixed melee and mixed range. We'll have to see how that goes, because obviously, Battle for Azeroth testing does take priority, but if you've missed the previous two episodes for Hunters and... not for Hunters, for Warlocks and Rogues, Hunters are last, then, of course, you can go check those out on the YouTube page. Those are listed all by the year. There's right here, the Rogues, there's the Warlocks, as well as all the shows do get put up on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play Music as the audio only. You can go check those out on my website at FinalBossTV. And an initial shout out real quick here at the beginning of the show to everyone supporting it and making sure I can keep sitting here doing this as we go forward through our... This will be the fourth expansion I've done these in. Battle will be my fourth, because I started MOP, to the Warlords and Legion, and goodness me. But Jason, Taislin, Screws Loose, Mia, R4, Troffles, and Drewish. I always look because the list might change sometimes. Thank you for your assistant producer pledges on the Patreon for the show. And if you would like, of course, to get more of these shows and follow along on the show notes, there are currently 34 BTS podcasts for these. After this show, we're going to record the Mage after show. So the three of us will sit down and talk about just how the show was and anything else that might have come up. So you want to check that out. But here's the Warlock show. And there was the Rogue show down here too. You can keep going back if you want more of these sort of behind the scenes podcasts if you would like. They're all right there on the show's Patreon page, linked down below. But I don't know how this happened. I mean, I kind of know how this happened, but he was just on the show like 3 weeks ago or something. I mean, it was like 2 months, but whatever. But Preheat's back. If you were sick of him, then I'm sorry. But there he is. Hello, sir. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be back.
But you're talking about mages this time, not just Taurus, Burning Throne. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always talking about mages, but yeah, specifically mages are the focus this time.
There you go. And I was telling you that his hair looks even better on this show than it did with the previous one. Chat, can you back me up on this? We'll have to wait for the delay. But I appreciate your time, sir. Hopefully we can break all this stuff down and not talk too much about Frost Mage. But, namesake aside, Frosted is back. Hello, sir. Welcome. You're muted. Perfect. Beautiful.
Fuck, I muted myself. Yo, okay. So that was like the silent wave introduction?
Yes, yeah. It was. It was beautiful. I liked it. It was good. Welcome back, sir. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been like, what, 2 years?
I don't know, actually. I'm sure I'll get...
It's been a while.
I'll get picked up in chat about that. But, yeah, GG Frosted. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But then you have your fresh meat, who apparently is a robot. I didn't know this until we started the show. So Nori is here. Hello, sir. Welcome.
Hello, everyone.
So why are you a robot?
I don't know. I apparently play like the APL and the Mage module, so that is, I think.
Okay, that's fair. He's also representing the entire EU community of mages, so everything he says is just a litmus test for how all EU mages feel. So whatever he says goes. All right, that's just it. That's the right there. So just take that and go with it. But. Exactly. Is that right though? Because they can send all your complaints and all their opinions to you, right? Is that how it goes? Yeah. Okay. Everyone, just ping Nori in Discord. All right. Right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good thing I enabled my do not disturb.
just do it. Just do it. But I guess to go back and forth on this one, I'll go right back to Nori on this because you are the new guest. And I just tried to poke to you about it when I was giving your introduction. But yeah, what do you do in the Mage community? What do you dabble in the Discord or Alter Time or whatever? What do you do for mages?
Yeah, okay. So I'm a SimC developer. So I develop mostly the Mage module for SimC. I'm also a theory crafter, so I come up with rotations, figure out how mechanics work, how to optimize your rotation and stuff like that. And I mainly work on the Frost mages. So
Ooh.
when you take a look at the Frost API right now, that's half of it is like my work,
Okay. So
and the other half, yeah.
how many keyboards have you gone through where whatever number you bind Frostbolt to is broken?
Luckily, just one because I'm very used to spamming Frostbolt.
Okay.
I've been playing Frost since like it's been almost 10 years now. So yeah, I'm very used to spamming Frostbolt.
My goodness. All right. Let's see how that works. Frosted, you were on the show for the first roundabout stuff in this expansion.
Yeah.
So you are. What do you have? What have you changed? What's evolved in your corner of World of Warcraft for the mage community you dabble in?
I think the only thing that's changed is a lot of the stuff that I used to have to manually produce, like the simulation craft dumps and like the trinket comparisons and talent comparisons and things like that. People have automated a lot of that, and with hero damage and stuff like that coming along, they've basically taken all of that off my plate, which is nice. So I basically do the same types of things that Norrinir does, working on like the development of simulation craft, implementation of mage related mechanics, although I'm much less frost focused than Norrinir does, so I have hands in all three specs.
But your name is Frosted though?
Yeah, but my name is Frost. Well, you can thank like 2005 me for that, right? 2005 me really liked Frost spec, but after 2 tiers of Frostable spam, I don't know how I'm feeling about it.
Okay. And Preheat, you're just a pretty face, right? You're just a.
Yeah, I'm just here to smile on the camera.
Okay.
Yeah, like I raid, and I'm also I try to hang out in the Discord. I definitely don't have anywhere near the impact that these folks have. These guys are doing the Lord's work for people like myself and everyone else, and we just kind of weigh in and say like, hey, I think there's something to look at here, but most of the work is done by the community. These guys are the best. So everyone.
Damn. Nice.
Yeah, usually when I make these shows, if you haven't picked up on the whole process that I try to build these up with, is that I like having a really highly progressed guinea pig, and then normally backed up by the math and theory and community developing crafters that actually know what's going on. Even though none of us are slouches in right now. Like, I finally killed Agromar, and I think you both are on Agromar right now, right behind me? Or no? Frosted, you're on Argus, right?
Argus is dead.
Oh, Argus is dead. Okay, well.
Yeah, he's dead, man. We
okay.
beat the Legion. It's all over.
Oh, okay, sure. So, there we go.
You beat the game.
Yeah, dude. Vacation time.
I can't wait. I want vacation time. I mean, you're right around where I am right now, right, Nori? You're, what are you throwing Frostbolts at?
We are on Coven right now.
Oh, you're on Coven right now. Okay. So we're all right there. Even though the sigh of relief, it's so weird because you've been done for like months, Preheat. What is it like when you see like the bulk of the community catch up to clearing and finishing all this stuff? Is it like a way different? Because you have probably friends and everyone that is in different realms in the game. So how does that?
Well, so like we have a lot of people, at least my friends, who love the game and they keep playing it over and over and over again in different guilds, so they'll like re-progress.
Right. Okay.
I don't really pay much attention to it. I kill the boss and then I go on like a sabbatical for like a couple months. I really don't play at all. However, I think it's interesting to see in the logs how people think of all sorts of cool things to do that I didn't think of. Like the people who push the content generally aren't the people who end up being like the top and doing all these weird random things that you see on Warcraft logs where you're like, what did they do? So it's interesting to see all that come about.
Interesting. Yeah, because I guess the knowledge you have of encounters is so limited comparatively when you're there in the first 2 weeks versus when like 3 months roll by and hundreds of more mages get on these fights and change maybe builds or talents or artifacts around or whatever, and then gear propagation. And
yeah, not just that, also like boss strategies, right? Because a lot of the strategies you'll see will just be completely different than how you did it. And it will mean that, maybe they get to AoE in certain situations. I don't know. It's just really interesting.
Okay. So I want to bring up off the top of the show on all of these catch-up shows are to go over where resources are located. And of course, Discord is a huge community think bed, just like ridiculous amount of stuff is posted there, pinned in an FAQ channel or whatever, but not every single class or spec has a resource outside of that. However, mages, I always have to plug this, have altered time. And what's the state of how altered time sort of interacts with the mage community now and Discord though? I mean, Frosted, do you want to, because the link is right up here to join our Discord. Oh, it's outside of my region, but Frosted, how's Altered Time holding up in the Discord era? What do you guys do on here?
I would say that in terms of a lot of really technical discussion, it's pretty much all moved to Discord. Like there's some discussion that still exists on the website, and there's some people who do come through and like write long things on the website. But the vast majority of like the discussion and work is really done on Discord, and the website is treated more as like a long-term hosting site, right? Because it's just, I don't know. I think that hosting large amounts of information in Discord is kind of messy. It's not really suited to doing it very well. And it's a lot easier to host a collection of links to a website or, forum posts. So that's really all it is now. It's just the hosting site.
Okay. Sounds good to me. But yeah, I think because we have one, I think that's starting with Battle for Azeroth for specifically Enhancement Shaman, like how Elemental has Storm Earth and Lava, and then there's Chain Heal for Resto. We have Stormstrike.io starting, which will just be basically like all the stuff that gets collated and moved together and figured out in the Discord community just gets slapped up on a website that just will sit there, which I think sounds like a lot what you guys do with Altered Time now. So
I think it should also be noted that the Mage community has been using IRC for years now. So even before Discord, we were using this chat method. Now, of course, back then we didn't have thousands and thousands of members, right? Like Discord really blew up that community. But but we've been using IRC for a long time.
Right. Okay. Yeah, when you say IRC, there are like a split divide that is like, oh, I know what IRC is. And the rest of the people are like, what? Depending on when they joined in the community on whatever side.
Back in my day.
Yeah, basically. So there are other resources here. I want to go over these images, I guess. And in correlation with, you plugged hero damage at the beginning, right? That Frosted brought that up. And so hero damage is a resource being put together now that sort of brings together all the, like, here's when you go into like the Mage page. So you have these combinations of gear and legendaries, and soon it'll have like Azerite gear and combinations in that regard that break down all the different, you have race combinations, relics, trinkets, and the overall combinations of a spec. And it breaks it down just like, here's fire. So it'll show you what set you're running. You can change which sets that you have. It'll change legendaries that you have, and it'll show you essentially your DPS, right? It all sort of puts it all in this huge list to see where it all runs. So, and Frosted, I'll let you go on this one because you commented on hero damage, and this sort of takes some of the work away from what you guys were doing. But how accurate is this being, and how is this going to become a thing in battle?
I haven't really looked through it to verify whether or not it's accurate or not, but I don't really mind things like this, right? As long as the person who's putting together the scripts that are like running these large amounts of sims does it in a reasonably responsible manner, it's pretty hard to screw up, right? So yeah, I don't know how good they are, but I hope he keeps doing it for Battle for Azeroth so that we offload all of this like really boring large simulation script running thing to, automated stuff. That'd be nice.
Right. Yeah. It'll be weird not seeing tier sets here anymore. I had the Arcane page up, and apparently like the second highest simming Arcane is 2-piece tier 19 still. So we live in a weird era in Legion right now with this whole 2-piece, 4-piece shenanigans.
Yeah.
But,
yep. Just make them mutually exclusive. Come on.
I don't know. Yeah.
It's too late. It's too late. It's too late.
It's
the
something
end of the expansion doesn't really matter at this point.
It doesn't matter. But check out hero damage and keep it bookmarked for how it's going to evolve and change and sort of be like an easy jump in, jump out system to see if you are a DPS spec in the game. Additionally, there's raid bots. And Raidbots is just simulation craft, but runs in the cloud. And so it's way quicker than running it all yourself on your local PC, because that's all your own processing power. So you can, of course, check out Raidbots as well. And Nori, because you work on the SimC APL stuff for Mages, do you communicate directly with Serialos about this, or do you just like make sure the SimCraft stuff is updated and then Raidbots just kind of pulls from that into the cloud and whatever it works with? How does that work for you guys on the back end?
Yeah, it usually works like that because Serialos has nightly and weekly builds.
Mhm.
So the weekly builds he updates every week, and the nightly builds are updated every day. So when we make some code change in the SimC code base, it will be compiled and replace the previous nightly the day after.
Okay.
So that's usually what happens when there are some huge changes. I usually ask him directly if he can push new build. So he will rebuild the SimC, put it on his server, so we can like point people. Okay, so for example, at the start of the OS, we had a huge glacial spike change where they removed the double dipping and increased the base coefficients by like 50%.
Right, okay.
So I implemented a change, poke serials, he rebuilt, and we pointed people, okay, so if you want to see how this change affects you, you can just go to Raidbots right now and check what happens, which is usually much better than just telling people, okay, so you can either compile from your source yourself, which most people cannot do, or just wait 2 or 3 days for the next nightly on the SimC side.
Mm-hmm. It always gets to a point as expansions roll forward that everything gets so fine-tuned and all the systems get put into place. And there's some little tweaks and things I guess you guys find in the back end, but at a certain stage in the expansion, you're basically done working on that. And then the beta builds come out, and again, like I said, like legendaries changing completely, artifacts gone, no more relic shenanigans. There's no more tier sets except for Azerite gear, but once you figure out where all the Azerite gear slots and Path of the Titans madness or whatever the hell they're going to do with that, then you got to figure all that stuff out again. But we talked about on the last 2 shows from like the math crafter point of view that it looks like there may be less variables to play with. So hopefully your jobs get a little easier at figuring all this crap out. Hopefully. So, because I have no idea how any of that works. Not a clue.
Tier sets going away is going to be a huge thing because right now we have a lot of combinations, like trying to figure out which pieces to use, especially now that we can use 4-piece and 2-piece from the previous raid tier.
Yeah.
So that creates a lot of combinations. That is going away. However, we'll be getting the Azerite gear, which I imagine will offer a lot of combinations as well. So depending on how the traits interact, like for example, right now, if you have the artifact traits for most of the classes, they do not interact. The interaction is very weak, so you can pretty much just sim them alone and just check which is the best. So you don't have to do like all the combinations and stuff like that. But depending on how the Azerite gear turns out, we might be back to running thousands or hundreds of thousands combinations just to figure out which of the Azerite pieces you actually want. Yeah, we do not have much information. For example, it's possible that we will have like damage increasing Azerite stuff in the first 1 or 2 tiers, and then the 3rd or 4th tier is going to be defensives. So that could reduce it, but at the moment we cannot really tell. So it could go either way.
And Frost, yes, an ad?
No, I was just going to say, I think it really heavily depends on Azerite powers. Like they could remove relics, and then they could make Azerite like this like highly interwoven interactive thing, right? And it could be an issue.
Yeah, and any additional systems they add afterwards just increase that complexity by like an order of magnitude, right? Because basically we're having to rerun all these simulations for all of those different combinations as well. So
fair enough, yeah. Yeah, we'll find out. We'll see. We have the most tools, and I've said this in the past 2 shows as well. We have probably the most tools ever as World of Warcraft players, just flat, of any expansion previously, right? So that it just keep adding more and more and more things. Because we think back to MOP, and we had like the end of RAR kind of a thing, and Simulation Craft really became a forefront. And now, between that time and now, going into Battle for Azeroth, there are so many different huge Google documents, obviously hero damage, raid bots, the updates to SimC, all these things. So You guys will figure it out. Have fun with your spreadsheets and all your math. I'll just click buttons and look at it.
That's really been all this expansion. All of those like auxiliary tools that you're talking about. I mean, we had Simulation Craft last expansion, and
Sure.
but this expansion, like the proliferation of tools, has been like around Simulation Craft is absolutely insane.
Right. Yeah, Pawn coming into the game itself, which is hit or miss depending on how well you fine tune it and whatever like that. Yeah, that's a good point. We'll have to see. What's that other one? It's Simpermut is another one too.
There's Sim Permutation.
Sim Permutation, yeah.
Yeah,
that's
there's
just
like a bunch of
pretty
different
much
add-ons
for
that do that.
setting like the combinations, and then you run it in your local SimC, or just paste it into your advanced mode in the raidbots.
Right.
Yeah,
Just
but this is mostly caused by the fact that gearing in Legion has been very unintuitive.
Oh.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
before you could have like your best in slot list and just use that. Right now, potentially everything can be an upgrade. Okay, so maybe this item doesn't have your best stats, but it rolled +20 Titan Forge, so now you're gonna use it. And we cannot just tell people, okay, so this is the best in slot, and they get +30 Titan Forge, and okay, it's not on the best in slot list, so I'm not gonna use it. Which, yeah, that just cannot happen.
In the last Q&A, Ian sort of breezed past the whole weapons may not Titan Forge. They may just Warforge, or they might not at all, which would be beautiful, because that always proves a weird problem, because obviously like the melee classes that gain more from weapon damage get huge weapon scaling above casters who only just gain int and secondaries, which will not scale the same way as just weapon damage would. So hopefully they just let that...
It depends on the class. Yeah.
That's okay. That's true.
It's actually the other way around, because most of the melee classes do not actually scale that well with weapon eye level. It's casters and then some melee classes. Yeah, like marksman hunters scale well, fury warriors, arms warriors.
Yeah.
And then you have stuff like rogues and Windwalker monks, and they do not scale at all. They like gain only third of the benefit that casters and these other melee get. So it's probably going to be an issue for those classes rather than for casters. So.
It's funny that still keeps happening, and I don't know why they can't figure out to remove weapon damage, just make like all melee attack power, because all ranged are just all casters are just spell power. I don't know. I can't. We'll see. The first build just dropped, so plenty is going to change. What's up?
Yeah, this is just the fact that, for example, when you look at, for example, let's say arms warriors, all their abilities are do 100% weapon damage, do 150% weapon damage, and so on. So they scale with the weapon DPS. So when you increase your weapon eye level, you get some stats, usually not that much compared to say casters, and you get extra weapon damage. Right. Which is what powers your mortal strikes and stuff like that. When you look at rogues or Windwalker monks, all their abilities are like, okay, deal 50% attack power, which where the weapon damage doesn't come into the picture at all.
Yep. Yeah, we'll wait and see. I know that's been a common question for a while, but on the last two shows, so Warlocks last week have designed Kerfuffleage, and they even had like a mini rework mid-expansion. And then before that, with Rogues, we talked about how many bugs they had that just sort of become gameplay systems where things are just broken. They just like, well, they're not getting fixed, so this is how the class works now. So then Mages, though, what has happened to Mages in Legion? Are there any? Which side of the ballpark are we on? Are there bugs, or are there just fundamental design problems? We'll leave Frost to last. Let's talk about Arcane first. So the first topic I had for Arcane was RIP Quickening, because who didn't see that coming, honestly?
Everyone saw it coming.
Yeah, it's been a hot mess. Arcane has been I mean, it's kind of settled down, but Arcane has been a little bit of a dumpster fire this expansion. We've kind of like ended up at a point where like Arcane has found its spot, but it's like too little too late, right? I don't know. I think that this is a theme with a lot of the Mage specs, is that there are bugs that are a part of the gameplay. I can give examples of all three specs at some point in the expansion having that be the case. Arcane, obviously, with Quickening, that's a really easy example. Frost with the double Ice Lance, which happens, doesn't happen, all depends on if they change, spell animations if it comes back again. And it is active right now. And then with fire, you have the ignite. I don't want to call it like the ignite exploit, but it was kind of doubling down if you use it with the proc. So yeah.
Yeah, who else on Arcane? I use the whole. I have the used whole mana as a resource. Is that even working yet? And then you talked about how Arcane found its place. It's basically relegated to this burst AoE-ish spec now.
Yeah, I don't think Arcane. I mean, if when you ask about broken specs, I think Arcane is the actual like the broken spec for mages, right?
Oh, okay.
The whole. Well, I mean, you got to think about it like in the context that we were sold specs in Legion, right? Like the whole framing of specs in Legion was class fantasy. That's what they tried to push, right?
Sure.
And Arcane's class fantasy from the very beginning was like leveraging mana and you having mana be a resource and it matters and it's supposed to be a tool that you care about instead of like it was in Warlords where you're like, oh, I sit at 90% and then I burn all of it and there's no real thought going into mana. And after Quickening died, mana basically doesn't matter. Like it doesn't do anything for you really. All it does is like as long as you have a minimum amount of mana to cast a 4-stack Arcane Charge, Arcane Blast, then it's fine. That's really all you need. The difference between like an APL that tries to be really, really, really smart with mana and an APL that just completely ignores it is like 1%. So I think when you're talking about broken specs, Arcane is like fundamentally not working. And you can see that through like the value of mastery and things like that over the course of the expansion.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
it's kind of funny because at the beginning of Legion, when they had Quickening, that kind of played into the whole mana as a resource fantasy, so that worked pretty well. However, the problem was with Quickening itself because the effect is so powerful that people were trying to exploit it in any way they could. So we arrived at this Nether Tempest spam, then they nerfed that, and we arrived, okay, so you're gonna just sit there doing nothing for 4 seconds, and then you're gonna cast Arcane Explosion to refresh your stacks, which obviously wasn't like healthy gameplay. And what is like the funniest thing about this is that their solution was to remove Quickening and replace it with another talent, which pretty much recreated the whole issue with mana as a resource, but on the other end, because now you do not care about mana at all because you're overpowered. As long as you have like 20 or 30% mana before your burn, you're fine. You do not have to care about mana at any other point. And this is basically the whole the conclusion to the damage stacking. So you have your Rune of Power, you have your Arcane Power, you have your tier 22 piece, and you use all your damage in those 15 seconds. Let's say 20, 15 seconds, and then you just do nothing, and you just try to do your normal rotation. But it turns out that all the damage between your Arcane Powers just doesn't matter all that much.
Yeah, there's an interesting design philosophy behind having this hero moment, almost like popping a super in like Destiny 2, where you have that 8 to 10 seconds of like, I'm a superhero, and that kind of what Arcane feels like in the Arcane Power window. But then it's not conducive to how like many encounters work out, where if it doesn't line up properly, then you just kind of do meh a lot. And I think that's a lot of what we've talked about on Mage shows going back even to MoP. You've had this period of awesome, and then like 80% where you're just kind of like blast, missiles, blast, barrage. And it just kind of feels slow and kind of not super engagey. But maybe that's the whole point, where it's like this scale that tips one way or the other, because Frost and Fire are like similar in how they feel all the time, which we could talk about Fire if you'd like, because that's every expansion they seem to poke the bear a little bit with Fire mages. But has it been the best so far this expansion, with how Phoenix Flames and Fire Blast and heating up Hot Streak is all that kind of worked out better overall? I mean, Preheat, you can take the start on this one.
Sure, yeah. So I mean, I think Fire as a whole, this expansion has been like really great recently. So I think that recently one of the bigger issues with Fire, and the reason why you don't see it being used as much, isn't really necessarily the damage aspect of it. It's like how the class works. So, for instance, on let's say you're doing Agrimar, right, and you're playing Fire on Mythic, and your goal is to not kill the ads. You don't have a control over that ignite spreading to the ads.
Yeah.
And then whenever that happens, it's all just going to fall apart. So one mistake the tank makes, ignite spreads, it spreads to the ads. All of a sudden, the ads are all dead. I really like that Mage is like the only range spec with a, and I think it's like really, really maybe a little bit underappreciated. It's the only range spec with a cheat death. And that's huge, at least in the progression scenario, right? Like, I think that Fire maybe last tier and the tier before was okay. I was lukewarm on it. I'm really sold on that this time around. However, Frost is just still so good. That kind of overshadows it. But I think Phoenix Flame has been a really good change. I like the ability to just kind of dish out some sick AoE damage in an instant cast. I think that that move is going to be sorely missed if it's removed. I'm not sure if it will be or not.
It's a talent in the first build in beta so far.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, like that obviously means that you would take it in certain situations and not in certain situations, and you'll definitely miss it. I feel like I'll miss it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, like all the mage specs have kind of had like their weird things that make them really good that aren't necessarily, you don't think that they're necessarily the intended gameplay.
Mhm.
But I think that Fire is the least egregious of those examples, like when it comes to the specs that have those little quirks to them.
There's a DPS variance percentage image that I want to bring up here real quick, which, not to like poke fun at mages, but this, what does this mean exactly? And this is coming from an enhancement, an elemental shaman player. So I'm at the top of this crazy thing, but this shows like, what is the percentage? What's the numerical value here? So Arcane's at 4.5, Fire 4.3, and Frost is 4.1. Who wants to walk me through this? Because I'm not sure.
Well, I can, I suppose.
Yeah, go for it.
So
Norrinir.
basically, it is a measure of how your DPS varies from pool to pool. Yeah. When you take a look at, for example, when you generate your SimC report or HTML report,
Right.
there is a number which tells you, okay, so your DPS spread is like 20%, which means that most of your pools will be plus minus 10% from the sim value which you actually got.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And as you can see, I think like mage specs are pretty alright in this regard. We are with not outlaw rogues where the variance is like their class fantasy.
Yeah, exactly.
The problems are that Fire obviously has bracers, which is probably the main contributor to their variance.
Okay.
Arcane has the whole thing with burst, where depending on if you get your crits during arcane power or if you do not, that will have very heavily skew your final DPS.
Right.
And Frost is just brain freeze. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Other than brain freeze, Frost is pretty low variance spec. But there's a lot of power in brain freeze, and it's just like a 30% chance. And you can very, very easily notice when you compare, for example, two locks of two Frost mages, where one has a lot of damage and the other one does not. It's like, okay, so let's take a look at the buffs, and okay, this mage had 20% more brain freeze procs.
Right. I wanted to bring this up in the middle of talking about all three right now because it sort of showcases the difference between all three of them. It's what's weird about it is that Arcane has the highest, at least based on this, but Frost has the most bad feeling variance. Yeah. So I don't know if we have anything else to go with Fire on this one, because I think Fire feels just mostly smooth during Legion, at least now, right?
Yeah, it's like it's I wouldn't say it's variance in the sense that you get different gameplay, because for example, as Frost, if you get the bad end of the stick, you're just spamming Frost bolts. As Fire, you have some catch-up mechanisms that allow you to actually get your hot streak procs. You have enhanced pyrotechnics. Right. You have your fire blast, so you can force your procs, which is nice. And most of the variance for Fire comes from your bracers. Because bracers are hugely impactful. They have just 15% proc chance. Mm-hmm. And what will dictate your DPS in most of the fights is just how many you got and if you got them during combustion or not.
What Preheat? What's up?
So I think it's important to note, because I think people are probably surprised looking at that chart to find that Frost is the lowest, right? That the reason why you feel like your RNG is so bad as Frost, like the reason why you feel it so much is because, like he said, like Nori said, like whenever you play Fire and you don't have good RNG, the play style doesn't just break. It isn't like there's like a bar in the gears, right? With Frost, if you don't get procs, you're just casting Frostbolt over and over and over again. And that may be fine if you're a Robo Mage, but if you're playing in the raid, there's stuff you have to adjust for, right? So you're sitting there like, come on, give me a proc. I need to move. I need to move. And you really feel it like so much more. Like the degree of, I guess, the player interaction with the game, since you're only casting one spell over and over again, like you feel it so much more. And that's why there's this perception that Frost has like this huge amount of RNG, when really of the three specs, it's the lowest.
I think it's a difference between RNG on a core mechanic versus RNG on something that's like auxiliary, right? Bracer procs are not a core mechanic to Fire, so you're no bracer procs, you're still playing Fire.
Right.
No crits in Arcane Power, you're still playing Arcane. No Brain Freeze procs, like you're just not playing Frost.
Yeah. Like if you go into your Arcane Power and you blast through and you don't have meters turned on and you don't crit a single time, you're gonna feel like, oh yeah, that was fine. Everything is fine. But then if you look at the meters, you'll be like, wow, my damage is really low. I wonder what happened. But as Frost, if you're having bad RNG, you know it. You are cursing. You're like, why am I still casting Frostbolt right now? It's unreal.
Yeah,
and it's frustrating.
To piggyback on that, we have a clarity of thought versus Frostbolt streaks. This little graph that was whipped up. And Nori, did you make this or?
Yeah, that is my work.
So this is. Yeah, go through this real quick to put that in perspective, what Preheat was just saying.
Yeah, so I put a slight modification into SimC to measure how many Frostbolts it casts in a row. So it was just simple counter. When you cast something that is not Frostbolt and it's on GCD, I would reset the counter, and all the other times I would just increment the counter. And then I collected the results for 5-minute fights and 10-minute fights, and take a look at what's the relation between how many clarity of thoughts you have, and so on. So because you obviously have your artifact leveled up, you will be between the 4 and 7. And you can see that even if you have all 3 clarity of thought relics from your crucible or just from the relic itself, during a 5-minute fight, you can expect the maximum Frostbolt streak to be about 9.
That's that's what we're looking at here. So clarity of thought is the artifact perk that increases brain freeze proc, right? Correct?
Yeah, by 2%.
Right. So, and you can see that with none, you're looking at, what is that, like 13 Frostbolts in a row without getting a proc. And at best, it's 9. On like a 5-minute fight. It goes up to like almost 11-ish on a 10-minute fight. But that's still, I mean, that's upwards of 10, 12 to 15 seconds based on your haste of just hitting the same one spell.
And mind you, this is average. So, for example, when I was running with 20k iterations, the worst Frostbolt streak I had was 35, I believe.
35 was the worst?
Yeah.
That's the better... It's the better part of a minute of just hitting Frostbolt, waiting for...
and I imagine the only reason that Chain got broken is because you cast Ebon Bolt or Frozen Orb.
Oh,
because you actually got a proc.
Yeah, because Frozen Orb obviously changes that, and then if Ebon Bolt comes up, you would change that too. But that's a weird part of how Frost works.
Yeah, I do not believe the issue is in the number of Frostbolts you're casting, because Frost Mages have always been sitting at like 50% time spent casting Frostbolts.
Okay.
But the main problem is the distribution, because when you just take something that is like this random, you will get huge streaks where you get proc every Frostbolt, and then you also get huge streaks where you do not get any Frostbolts. So if the distribution was more even, I believe Frost would feel a lot better to play, even though you would still be like casting 50% Frostbolts.
Right. Well then, how is, although the curveball at Frosted here real quick, what do you guys think in the Mage community? What could be fixed? What's a suggestion point to throw a dart at the dartboard for Blizzard to make this mechanic or core gameplay functionality better in battle for Frost Mages?
Interesting. You make flurry charge based.
Wouldn't that, I mean, okay. That's sort of similar to Fire Blast then for Fire Mages, yeah?
Fire Blast is a faster cooldown, and I think it performs a different function.
Sure, okay.
But it would be... I mean, it's similar in that it's a charge spell, but what Fire Blast is doing for the fire rotation and where Fire Blast is used and sort of the way you think about it, I think would be very different than the way you think about Flurry on a charge-based system.
Okay.
And putting Flurry on a charge-based system, and you could have it reduced in any number of ways. It just depends on how you want it, right? If you still want a proc type thing, you can make some Frostbolt procs random reduction on Flurry charge.
It could be like
Or
Shaman.
you can just make it hasted. I don't know, Shaman. Sorry.
Well, you're talking about sauce and meatballs, right? With lava surge
lava
procs.
burst.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I see. Yeah, but I think that's the easiest way to do, like what Norrinir was saying, where you're not really changing the ratio of like frostbolts that you're casting in a fight. You're just making it so that you don't go this gigantic amount of time without having a brain freeze proc or without having proc seeker.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, you have.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead. I'm moving.
You have like a
slides.
very thin, like safety net with Frost, right? And that's like your Frozen Orb and your Evan Bolt. And aside from that, you're out in space, right? Like you are bound to your procs. So if you fall through, if you don't have anything to catch you, you're waiting 40 seconds. You're dropping 40 seconds until you finally get a proc. Now, it's very rare. You may only see it once this whole expansion, but it can happen is the thing. Like, it is allowed to happen.
Yeah. Which, those are the things you talk about with Blizzard's design, with how these 3 specs work, and how we've talked about how weaving, heating up hot streaks is how fire works. And you can have some downtime, but a lot of the time, played properly, you're throwing fireballs into pyroblasts relatively frequently. Arcane obviously has like this 80-20, where 80% of the time you're kind of like meh, and 20% of the time you're this superhero. But then Frost has sort of like this weird middle ground of both, where you have the proc gameplay, which could either give you like 5 million burst currently in Legion numbers on the pull, or tank burst. So, and that doesn't, there's like an extreme window there. You also have this. I'll bring up this picture here real quick too. I want to talk about the Ice Lance madness that Frost also has. So this is another picture. And Nori, do you want to walk me through what the heck this means? Because this has plagued Frost all of Legion.
Yeah, so basically at the very beginning of Legion, in the Legion pre-patch actually, we got Flurry, which was a new spell. We got Winter's Chill, again, a new mechanic. And in the first iteration, it was like when you cast Flurry, you do these 3 balls, and when they impact, they give you Winter's Chill, which is a debuff that allows you to treat the target as if it was frozen. So the natural thing is you cast Instant Flurry, then you follow it with Ice Lance, because the Ice Lance will hit a frozen target and get the extra damage.
Sure.
The problem is that, like back in the first iteration, the Flurry debuff, the Winter's Chill, lasted 1.6 seconds. So if you got your haste to about 90%, which would put your GCD under probably the 1.6 seconds, you could cast Flurry, Ice Lance, and both would hit while the debuff was swapped. So that allow you to like get 2 Shattered Ice Lances on a single Flurry. And then you have Thermal Avoid, which makes this super powerful because you're not just gaining extra damage, you're also gaining a lot of Ice Winds uptime. So Blizzard changed it. So after the first few weeks of Legion, we got Flurry, which was I think the debuff was like 1.3 seconds, maybe even less. So that worked. They killed this kind of gameplay. However, it created another problem because now you need like 20 or 30% haste before you can actually do Flurry into Ice Lance. So if you are a new mage, you do not have a lot of haste from your gear. You just cannot use Ice Lance after Flurry because it wouldn't hit during the debuff.
Because I did all of my testing back in beta, and so I understand when you talk about these core mechanical changes, and because I put like 8-12 hours in each of these things. And I thought that was the funniest thing about Frost, is when they changed like the whole Frostbolt into Flurry into Ice Lance like combo, that weaving combo. And it looks great now with the new spell animations. But the fact that there's such a small window of time that Blizzard gave you that then the players get creative with. Then they try to fix that, and then it breaks the core gameplay of it and forces you to gear to a certain amount of haste to actually get the global cooldown low enough to actually cast the core rotation properly.
Yeah, pretty much. So,
These things always make me feel. I mean, that's where the math comes into play, right? That not many players know about, at least on the surface level. But that is ridiculous. I love the 100% haste line here, that you can actually be further out than you can physically cast spells, and it'll still work.
yeah, this is there because some bosses have a huge hitbox.
Sure, that's true.
Where you are still extending at max range, but your spells are traveling more than 40 yards.
Right.
And, yeah, just to finish on that point, in
Sure.
Nighthold, they changed the duration to 1.6 seconds again, and we got it again. So obviously they changed it back to, I think, like 1.45 seconds, which was mostly fine. But then we figured out, okay, so we can just run towards the target. And because as you run, your ice lenses travel less and less, you can fit 2 into the window again. So pretty much all of Nighthold, it was very easy to actually do this double ice lens where we were just running towards the boss and getting these 2 ice lenses into Winter's Chill, which obviously they did not like. So they did the final change, which is where we are right now. And that is that Flurry, the base debuff is 1.8 seconds. But the time between the hits, when the debuff is actually applied, is reduced by your haste. So if you have 100% haste, the debuff would be 1.4 seconds. If you had 300% haste, it would be 1.2 seconds, and so on. Which mostly kills the double ice lens, but not really, because it just creates another set of breakpoints, which is that are much harder to achieve, which is why it's not as common these days. But still, if you have certain haste, you are at certain range from the boss, you can cast Flurry, Ice Lance, run towards the boss, cast another Ice Lance, and get it, which is what this chart is about. So depending on how far you are from the boss and what is your haste, you can take a look at this table and, okay, it is green, I can run in and do this thing.
I feel like that's such a weird way they have tried to combat this issue. Why doesn't the Winter's Chill debuff just put like one charge that your next Ice Lance acts as if the target is frozen? Because it would physically only affect one Ice Lance, which is the core rotational like component. Why do they keep playing around with this weird haste, synergistic debuff, uptime, downtime, distance moving? Because at the time you could Ice Lance blink forward, then Ice Lance. That was a thing. Like
Shimmer, but yeah.
Yeah, Shimmer, but yeah. Because you be able to cast while moving. That's true.
Yeah.
Why though?
Because they like the shatter combo.
Yeah,
okay.
That is the main part, because you want the Winter's Chill to be there when your Frostbolt, Ebon Bolt, or Glacial Spike hits, so that you can actually do these small combos.
Okay.
Yeah.
However, what you said is that, okay, so we have this debuff, and when the Ice Lance hit, it removes the debuff. That would work. That would work, and I'm not sure why they chose to go this way, but that's where we are right now.
I only bring up the devil's advocate point there because these systems, and many specs have them, where Blizzard does these like really complicated mathy percentages, multipliers, whatever, where some of the suggestions that come out of the community just make it work, and it could be just so much simpler to then figure out and then play around with. And Blizzard wonders why their community, at least from the DPS standpoint, gets so confused when little minor changes happen to our specs that then break everyone's understanding of how things work because of stuff like this. So I don't know. Do you guys have, this is like Mage roundtable time. Do you want to, what else do we have on this one? Frost, do you have anything to add, or
on Frost?
Or
double Ice Lance?
Or just mages in general? Just this state of where you guys are right now with mages. You could also, if you want to talk about battle stuff right now, you can a little bit if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, I think mages in general are okay, right? Like Frost, double Ice Lance is an issue, but they've sort of, it's a small issue, right? And it's a pretty easy fix. So in Battle for Azeroth, hopefully they can fix it. And even if you don't, it's a small thing, right? Like even if you optimize it really heavily, it's like 3%. And in a lot of situations, it's not even practical to do. I think Fire's in a really good place. I think Fire's like in the best place it's ever been. It lost some of like the really cool gigantic combustion ignite play that it had in prior expansions, and traded it in for just really consistent, solid gameplay and pretty good mechanics outside of like the ignite spreading Preheat talked about. And then Arcane is kind of a mess, but they're already showing in Battle for Azeroth, like the changes to Arcane are already looking pretty interesting, and they're like very clearly targeting the issue that nobody gives a shit about mana, right? They're trying really hard to make you care about mana, at least with some of the current changes. So I think we're in an all right spot overall, and so far things look to improve in Battle for Azeroth, but it's still pretty early, and they could still fuck it up. So we'll see.
Yeah. Preheat, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. So like my only thing, like double ice lance, it's whatever, right? Like double ice lance happens, it doesn't happen. It used to be more damage. Now it's like, you know, you optimize. It's really hard. I find it really fun because I challenge myself to find situations where I can double ice lance where I shouldn't be able to, like Mattress, stuff like that, where I'm like really pushing the limits of where I can, oh, pun intended, of when I can double ice lance. Yeah, so I mean, like that's like pretty minor to me. My main gripe with Frost is just that there needs to be something done about Flurry. And yeah, charge base would definitely fix it. I mean, personally, for me, whenever you start getting things that are procs or like charges and we're just building procs and charges, you're getting to the point where it's pretty much a resource at that point and you just aren't calling it that. I would like to see something in that direction. I don't know, maybe I'm alone in that, but I would like to see Frost kind of do something with icicles other than just make them fancy and dance around my head, and I don't really care about them unless I'm playing Glacial Spike, you know, because it seems like a wasted opportunity. But Fire is like really solid. It plays really well. Probably my favorite range spec, the whole expansion. Right now, it's just that, you know, Frost has 2 ice blocks, so, and really good trinket interaction. Yeah, and Arcane, I mean, it's fun to play around with, but I think there needs to be a lot of work done to get Arcane back to a spec where I would actually play it seriously again. But yeah.
No, so Arcane has gone through so many back and forths on the mop model versus the Warlords model versus the Legion, and then like the 2 different Legion models technically pre and post quickening. So that's been a weird one. That's sort of like what Demonology Warlocks had to deal with. We talked about on the show last week. About every expansion, there's a rework to this spec, and the other ones get tweaked a little bit. But this one spec keeps changing every expansion. So, and that sort of seems like Blizzard trying to figure out the mana mage conundrum with Arcane. But
speaking of which, the mana thing, that to me is probably my biggest gripe about Mage as a whole right now, is the fact that spell steal is, well, so spell steal is like a very minor thing, right? Because it's something you only cast situationally. However, with Fire, the fact that Pyroblasts aren't free, we are still, and this is how many days, if this was like a sign, like how many days since an incident, that number would just be like huge right now. How many days? Because we still have issues with mana in Fire, right? Like it doesn't really affect most people because they don't really have a situation where they're going to see that. However, you can still go with Fire. It still happens, and it's been a problem this whole expansion, and we keep complaining about it, and nothing's getting done. And it's just a little frustrating that we are still dealing with this. Like, I get that mana needs to be part of Mage because of the class fantasy, but I'm tired of going low on my mana as Fire all the time. And that's just part of the gameplay. Like, it doesn't seem like that should be a thing, personally.
okay.
Yeah, that's my biggest gripe.
That's a weird one. Is that only more impactful because of Bracer gameplay, or is just Fire Mage still, period, just having...
Well, it is more impactful because your combustion is 10% over max mana.
Oh.
Right. So, like, with Lustring and Combustion, this becomes, like, way more prevalent, right? Because the more haste you get, the more spells you're casting. If anything, Bracers actually kind of helps because you're spending more time casting one spell as opposed to casting a whole bunch of little spells. Yeah, the main thing is just at some point, and I think it was in the beta, they made Pyroblast not be free anymore. I think it was part of the whole class fantasy where everything costs, you know, mana. And that's what broke it. Like, at that point forward, you can look at the chart of Fire mana and it just goes down. And if you do Sims for long enough, you'll see like your damage, your haste values are like going negative, and you're like, what the heck is happening? How is my haste negative? And then you realize, oh, Robo Mage is running out of mana. That's what's happening.
Yeah, it's pretty much that like your base rotation is mana like doesn't consume any of your mana. But if you have Time Warp, Heroism, Bloodlust, you will start slowly to consume mana. And then you have to cast Combustion, and Combustion just takes your chunk of mana, and then you do your normal rotation that doesn't change your mana at all. Then you do another Combustion, your mana drops by another 10%. Then you do your normal rotation, your mana stays the same, and at some point you just run out of mana.
I can see like the fantasy in that because a fire mage just like burns through it slowly, pun intended. But then that never feels good as a caster because you have no ways to get mana back as fire.
It's definitely
if we had mana gems or evocation as fire,
right?
I mean, it wouldn't be super fun, but it would at least be something. The main problem is that when they did the rework in Legion, they removed the haste scaling for your mana per second. And because that was mostly done for Arcane, because Arcane had to get this new shiny mastery, which increases your mana and mana regeneration. So they just nuked the mana scaling with haste for all specs. And at the start of Legion, we actually had problems with Frost, where Blizzard and Flurry would make you run out of mana. And they fixed those. But kind of forget to fix those with fire. So.
Ian said again in the last Q&A that they probably went too ham on class fantasy in Legion, and where it's neat to feel like you're a fire mage, they want to bring back a little bit of how you feel like you're just a mage that specializes in fire. So we'll have to see how that tweaks, because they're bringing back all the buff nonsense and bringing in little tweaks and perks and different changes to CC and non-CC and removing some and changing some, and we'll have to see if they fix that. Like all 3 mage specs should just have Evocate. If they want to make mana matter, then Evocate should just be part of all 3 mage specs, that you spend your mana, different in variable time depending on what you're doing, and then you Evocate again. Evocate's been in the mage toolkit forever.
Yeah.
So they just how fire used to play, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because you'd feel like you'd burn your mana away, and then you would just whoop, there it goes.
If part of your class is a bar that goes down, you need a way to make it go back up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like a core design thing, right?
Yeah.
That's not happening.
Okay.
I think they should have core design philosophies that mean something like class. What does class fantasy mean? How do you Ian talks about them going ham on class fantasy. Like how does that translate into the mechanics of the specs, right? Like how is that a design goal? I don't understand. I don't know. I read the dev water coolers, and they just don't make a lot of sense to me, right? It's like these big ideas that they have for specs. So
yeah, which I think that's.
I'd rather they just say like we want to do specific things with the specs, like mechanically specific things with the specs, right?
Yeah,
and then act on those things. I think that would make more sense, and it would help us as a community, like give better feedback.
Those points always come up sort of towards tail ends of expansions, because you see how much they iterated on during an expansion, and we know that a lot of specs aren't being iterated on very heavily at all going into battle. Only a handful of them are in any type of Legion approach, right? Mostly Demonology, Survival Hunter, Demon Hunter, Havoc is getting quite looked at a lot. So obviously because it's first expansion after it was launched. So we'll see what they do with their whole class fantasy stance or not, but I think that's about it for the first chunk of the show. Anything else you guys wanted to add in like the Mage roundtable part, or are we good? Good to go? Anything you want to
fix Frost Mastery?
Oh,
fix Frost Mastery.
You both sort of said that in different ways now. Then this icicles being just like,
yeah. We haven't really talked about it all, but if you go back and watch the coma in my episode, we like went super ham on this. Felt like not putting you guys through that again, but
if you want
there's
to like
a
catch
problem.
up.
Yeah, you should go watch that video, and then that will like show you that this problem is there, and it's still a problem. It hasn't been fixed.
Yeah.
But let's not beat the dead horse on that.
Yeah, I'll just say that having Mastery, which only works on your filler spell, is a really bad idea.
Yeah, which I think that's definitely a fine tuning point because they have. I mean, hey, bring it up on the show. You never know what's going to happen because the rogues brought up the fact that assassinations mastery is only poisons, and lo and behold, first alpha build, it's poisons and bleeds. They did it. The rogues did it. So maybe we'll see a change to the frost mastery and how that works interconnected with the class. Icicles look kind of cool, and they're neat with Glacial Spike, kind of Black Ice, whatever. But at the same time, they just, like you said, work on the filler spell, which is... We'll see.
Yeah, my hope for Battle for Azeroth is that we get Frostburn back, which is the original Frost Mastery.
Oh.
That had a lot of issues before, but now that we have Winter's Chill, I think it would be perfect fit. So.
Well, there it is. You get one Blizzard. I mean, you don't. You get many. We'll have pages soon when the alpha beta opens up. But I'm going to move us along here real quick and plug a few things, and then we'll go into the more nitty-gritty topics in the show, at least. So real quick, of course, if you are watching the show right now and missed any part of this episode or any previous ones, these all go up on the YouTube channel that hosts all the shows, sort of like a big old archive, as well as all the side content that comes out. And with the coverage that I'll be doing, that even some of my top videos still are Legion beta coverage videos, I'll be doing a similar series, of course, when Battle for Azeroth comes out, both the live shows and my sort of talking head discussion episodes. These will be a thing again, of course, soon. But there was the Rogue Ketchup show. We had the Warlock one as well. We have Hunters coming up next and a possible tank and healer separate. But it depends on when beta starts, right? Because that'll be the main focus of the channel. But you can go check all those out there. We had Methods interview here. We had the year-end specials. We had channel updates. All these, you can go check them out on the YouTube channel, of course. And the iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play Music. Just search Final Boss TV if you want the audio-only versions of this main show. And on Patreon, if you want more of the shows, you can get the BTS podcast. The Mage show is going to have an after show BTS, where after we're done wrapping up here, we'll talk for 20-30 minutes and just kind of rant and ramble about things. But if you want to follow along on the show notes, of course, or see how the show gets put together in the back end, or get the BTS podcast for any of these, there's like 30 something of them now. Yeah, there's 34 of them. So you can go check all those out on the Patreon page. Keep the show going for another expansion. 4th one coming up. Ridiculous. But Jason, Tazelin, Screws Loose, Mia, R4, Troffles, and Druish, thank you very much for your continued incredibly generous support to keep this show happening. If you're watching on YouTube, there's the red YouTube button. It's like down there. Hit that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date on the shows. We'll see what YouTube does in the future with whatever they're doing right now. And then, of course, there's the button up here, too, on Twitch if you want to do that one. Either way works for me. Thank you for all for tuning in and watching in whatever capacity you've been doing over the last many years as we move forward into another expansion. So, that's enough out of me. Just, God, I want to go over the cookie cutter nature of the specs and at least look at talents now, which let me bring this up over here, wherever I put it. And I wanted to do Arcane first. So which one of you wanted to tackle and walk through a little Arcane? You guys can do it together, I guess. This is just a community walkthrough of like what Arcane is talenting lately. Because I have no idea. But apparently, I mean, I guess it's like what is the sort of standard spec that Arcane mages are rolling around, and what talents are never taken anymore. I don't know.
The starter pack, yeah.
The starter pack, yeah, exactly.
Amplification, Rune of Power, Resonance, Erosion, and Overpowered.
Oh,
You
what was
can
so?
run that for almost everything.
So amplification, Rune of Power. You said resonance, I guess.
Resonance, yeah.
And then erosion.
Erosion.
Overpowered.
Overpowered. I mean, I guess amp isn't actually that good on AoE, so you'd like switch that out for AoE.
Well, sure,
But
for sure.
For the most part, you can run that on pretty much everything.
Yeah.
Like you'll never switch out erosion. You'll never switch out overpowered. The difference between resonance and charged up on single target is like very, very small. And on AoE, it's you just pick resonance, right? You'll never switch out Rune of Power. And then you'll maybe switch like amplification for Arcane Familiar or Words of Power on AoE, but the difference is pretty small.
Well, there is a point to be made about the second tier, which, unlike the other two specs, Arcane actually has a choice here because it's roughly like half and half split on the mages that are using Shimmer and that are using Slipstream.
Oh.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you get one button to choose a different one on. All the rest are just.
That's
I prefer Slipstream, honestly. I think I like Slipstream. I don't know.
the
Being able to
Slipstream
move
is
from location.
new. This is a new one that came in middle of the
Yeah.
expansion or so. Yeah.
Yeah.
1.5.
Yeah.
This is this is the basically the way that they dealt with taking away ice flows from Arcane.
Yeah.
Just because there are a lot of knockback mechanics, especially in dungeons, and if you're casting Evocate, Shimmer will not help against those.
Yep.
So see a minute. So that's basically your insurance against that sort.
That's an interesting one. Yeah, because Slipstream is a passive where you get. I mean, it's
they're both passive.
right. Well, but I mean, I'm looking at the tooltips anyway. Shimmer costs mana and has charges. Slipstream, I think this tooltip is broken. It has procs per minute, but that doesn't.
Yeah, that's not right.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
That's strange.
It's always up. You can just cast while moving with those two spells. Yeah.
Right, of course.
Yeah, well,
That's-
Shimmer replaces your blink, so you don't actually get like more buttons. So that's kind of the point Frosted was making.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
not
okay.
like talenting into more options, right? You're just
Right.
improving an option you already have.
Sure. Chat, of course, I see that chat brings up, F's in chat for Rune of Power, which is like a love-hate relationship with all mages, I think, across the board. That either this is the nerfed version. It was 50% stronger earlier in the expansion. It was
Yeah.
nerfed to 40.
Yeah.
But it's just this Incanter's Flow and Mirror Image. Poor Mirror Image, man. Ugh.
Yeah, I suppose Incanter's Flow is sometimes used when you have to move a lot, where you just cannot stand in your own, especially like when you are doing some crazy AoE fiesta where you're just running out all the place. But if you can avoid this, you pretty much want to use Rune of Power everywhere you can.
I like the outside looking in because of my experience with at least a little bit of Arcane from the beta. I'm way more of a fire mage. At least I played one last expansion and whatnot. But I like how the really neat looking spells that Arcane has, like Supernova, Nether Tempest, Arcane Orb, even though they shrank it for some reason. Revert Arcane Orb's size, Blizzard, please. They don't get used. And I always think that's really sad when like really neat looking spell effects, because all these are passives. Resonance, Erosion, Overpower, these are all passives. You drop a Rune of Power on the ground, sure, I guess, but that always just sucks. I think.
Yeah, you use Arcane Orb. It's not you. It's your shoulder pads using them for you.
Oh, okay.
This is very much. There are two reasons for this. Well, the first of all is that you no longer need mana, so who cares if you have a free spell or not? Because back in Warlords, Supernova did some damage, which was actually pretty good, especially with like the Prismatic Crystal.
Yeah.
But most importantly, it was free. So you actually got some mana out of it, and then you could continue staying on your 4 Arcane Charge rotation for a bit longer. Now you don't care about mana, so what's the point? And the other thing is that if you take a look at your artifact, you will go through all the traits, and you will notice that there is a distinct lack of Supernova impacting traits.
Right.
Which
And
is
in Resonance,
pretty much like the same deal for all the artifacts, because they only work with your baseline spells, so all the talents get penalized in this way.
Yep. Yeah, because Resonance just straight up, even on single target, gives Arcane Barrage 25% more damage, just because it's just there. It's just, yeah, there's some talent problems, I guess, too, when you have such a... I mean, Frosted, I just looked at the talent sheet and just like, this, and this. And then that was no back and forth at all, which is unfortunate. I mean, Nether Tempest was hilarious with quickening, but that's because you abused the crap out of it. But that's obviously gone.
It was a good way to proc Arcane Missiles, but they gave it special Arcane Missile proc rate interactions, so...
It was also a great way to ruin your hands.
Yeah. I actually, what was funny is, and I know that some other people did this too, I put up the stream and every button on my screen was Nether Tempest, except for like 3 of them. And so every time I pressed the button, my whole screen did the GCD. Whoosh, whoosh.
No, gosh. Oh, man. Oh, gosh. That's funny. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I got to give Blizzard a little kudos. I know we've been a little negative in our outlook of how things have panned out. Obviously, if you are very familiar with the subject, that's going to be the case, right? You're going to be a little critical. But I gotta say that Rune of Power, I think, has really made a huge improvement. Rune of Power used to be on the radar as like, this is the worst, we have to fix this, and I think that they've really made it not as horrible. It could still be improved, but it's definitely come a long way. So I gotta give a little kudos.
Well, Rune of Power has its sort of area of effect forgiveness, which is also awkward because not standing in it, then how far away is it? I mean, mages learn the distance, I'm sure. And then normally make like your your little Venn diagram that you stand next to, and then you stand anywhere around it, like in a block, and you're good to go. But yeah, I wonder if it's gonna stay or stick.
Yeah, I believe there is actually supposed to be a ground effect for that, but it's for whatever reason it's like 1 feet under the ground, so you cannot see it most of the time. Which was like one of the bugs we reported a long time ago.
Yeah, shouldn't it have like, I'm thinking Jaina's Arcane Brilliance AoE or that pulsing ground effect she has like Mount Highjaw? Why is that not on the Rune of Power? So you can like see how far away you can go from it, whatever. Little things like that, we'll see.
I mean, Rune is way better than it used to be. The people hate Rune now, man.
Yeah,
It was like Throne of Thunder Rune of Power, man. Oh man, I feel like if people went back and had to play that, they would be like, all right, actually Rune of Power is all right.
Wasn't that the instant cast? It only lasted for a couple of seconds version or something?
No, it was the one that you had to keep down all the time, and it was super small.
Oh, okay.
It's the floor is lava edition of Mage, right? Like,
Okay.
you can only move where you put a rune.
Oh, okay. Just keep, you gotta, okay.
Yeah, it was really bad.
Combine maintenance debuffs with aerial denial, and there you have old Rune of Power.
In your
It was
own
like, what, 3
kit.
or 5 radius, like 3 or 5 yards across, right? Like in diameter, it's really small.
Ew,
It was
gross.
interesting,
Yeah.
to say the least.
Yeah,
That's bad. That's real bad.
yeah.
So how about Preheat? You want to walk us through what fire mages are playing around with right now, or the cookie cutter build, and how that sort of has options or doesn't have options?
Yeah, so fire is the spec that has the most options, actually, which is nice. It's nice to actually have some choices, although it really doesn't have that many, even though I'm saying it has the most. So let me, my WoW head just crashed, actually, so I'm bringing this back up again. Actually, I have to have it in front of my face to say it.
Sure.
Let's see. Okay, yeah. So basically what you'd be looking at is, for the most part, and there we go again. Hold on. I'm just going to look at your screen. There we go. Okay, so Firestarter is really fun, but really the important thing there is if you have the privilege to not have to cast your cooldowns on the pull, right? Like if you're holding your cooldowns, Firestarter is going to be really good. Otherwise, Pyromaniac is generally just going to be like a really solid option. So essentially, the choice between those two kind of depends on like a lot of different things. I'm oversimplifying it, but essentially, be going one of those two for single target can flag for AOE.
Yep.
Rune of Power is really great for AOE. It's a little slightly better for single target as well, but you can go in Kinder's Flow. So I would recommend, if you're gonna pick up fire and you don't want to really dive deep, just play around in Kinder's Flow. It's going to be your better choice for most fights. Flame On is pretty much the choice you're going to make on that 60 talent row most of the time. There's just like some slight examples like in AoE where you take AF instead. So you take Flame On, and then Unstable Magic is the boring single target talent. Don't ever take that. Take Living Bomb or Flame Patch and then hope the AoE happens. That's my philosophy.
Come on.
Yeah,
Flame
it's such a minor
Patch,
difference.
Flame Patch has had some, I wouldn't say the T word this expansion though, but I know there was like the meme fire build that came up. Was that in Tomb, where they had a nerf Flame Patch or nerf Flame Strike because of
Flame Patch has been insane in the past, especially in the beta. I don't know if you guys were paying attention to Flame Patch in the beta, but that spell was insanely broken. And it's kind of gone back and forth between being like stupid broken and pretty decent. Yeah, Flame Patch is weird because it totally affects your scaling. Your mastery is going to be totally thrown off. Your haste versus mastery values for AoE are completely just like tossed around whenever you choose Flame Patch. But yeah, so for the last talent row, I would go with Kindling in most situations. However, Meteor, it has some really good opportunities too. It all depends on the fight, right? So a fight like Kingroth, where you have 2-minute increments that you're using cooldowns, and you can pre-cast Meteor, that's going to be really awesome because you can just slam the ad. However, if you get an extra combustion at the end and you really need the execute damage, maybe go with Kindling. It all kind of depends. I think a lot of these are very situational. It takes a lot of explanation to give you the best one, but this is probably the cookie cutter I'd go with. Actually, Kindling said on the last one. Yeah, that's what I would run with for most things.
No Cinderstorm. Are you sure?
Let's not talk about that spell. I don't like it.
Wow, just straight up, let's not talk about it. Wow. I remember testing this thing like 2 years ago, and I was just like, why though? It's just
It was really great in the end, you know, the whole like tech where you could go in with a 5-stack PI, but PI has been nerfed to the ground. So not as important anymore. I don't know. Cinderstorm is interesting, but I'm glad we don't really run it anymore.
Just the weirdest spell workaround I think I've ever seen in this silly game before, because it's just not whatever. I'd rather throw meteors personally, but
listen, man, Chad spent a lot of time on the whiteboard working out the formula for the curvature of Cinderstorm.
Oh my god, stop.
That's why Cinderstorm isn't dead. He spent a lot of time on that whiteboard.
Oh my gosh.
The convergence point.
Yeah.
I guess so. So I have to ask this just as a side note. The movement tier, which is getting reworked in beta, at least I think it's moved around something. Well, the quote-unquote movement tier, where you have Shimmer, Blast Wave, and then Blazing Soul, right? Like
Shimmer all the time.
Right.
Just all the time.
That's what I was going to say. There's no reason to take Blast Wave because it doesn't do enough damage to matter. Even though it looks amazing. I'm using it when I'm leveling my Velf right now. Oh, it's so good. It just looks good.
Yeah, the only question on this row is, do you need to break stuns with Blink? Because if you do, then don't go Shimmer. Otherwise, go Shimmer.
Oh, does Shimmer not break stuns?
Feels bad, man.
Really? I didn't know that. That's strange. Huh.
It's not Blink.
It's not Blink.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. Interesting. But that at least what's up, Nori?
It doesn't break your roots either. So if you're like sitting in a Frost Nova and you shimmer, you still sit in a Frost Nova.
I guess that's the trade-off, because it's off the global and you can cast while doing it versus the utility of Blink. Okay. Gotcha.
I feel like something should be noted here. This is a little, I guess, it's just something that interests me. I'm very interested in WoW spells that scale exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
They are awesome, and I like them, and they break the game in a lot of ways. So Mage actually has 2 examples of this. You have your Conflagration Flare-Up, and you have Living Bomb. And not many classes have 1, and Mage has 2. So we're special.
I don't think that's actually exponential. It's just quadratic.
Well, what I'm saying is that the spell itself... Are you talking about Living Bomb or Conflagration Flare-Up?
No, a Living Bomb in particular.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, to a certain extent, right? Like, I'm not talking like scaling up to like 100 targets here.
So what
I'm just saying that each target affected by Living Bomb will explode and hit the other targets. So each target that you add is hitting all of the other targets that you also have.
Right. Yeah, right? There was some shenanigans with this with Warlock and one of their grimoires, and how their stupid soul conduit, not soul conduit, the one that they could affliction, they could make that soul next to themselves, but they put it in melee range, and it did like the same thing Living Bomb would do, right? Where it would AoE itself, but other mobs would AoE it, and then that damage would AoE off of it back to the other mobs, and just like scaled out of control, just ridiculously wacky. So I see what you mean. Like, if there's 20 mobs and you can actually cast Living Bomb on 20 mobs, all 20 mobs hit each other with their own Living Bomb, and everyone else's hits it too. Yeah. Yeah.
Shout out to Conflag and Living Bomb in Eye of Ashara, pulling all the crabs while you're on your mount in a Mythic plus 22.
Yeah.
As long as it isn't explosive weak, you gather all the crabs, AoE them down by yourself.
Yep.
That feels really good.
No, I've seen like the 20+ million damage Fire Mage madness that can happen in that, or more depending on how many crabs you pull. Yeah, it just looks funny. That's really good.
That's honestly the only reason I play the game is for those crabs.
Okay. That's not going to be clipped and taken out of context or anything like that. That's good. All right. Solid stuff. Discord, do your work. So the weird thing about Conflag is you have to fireball things, but you just fireball like one and then it can keep spreading, right?
No,
Well-
so like the flare up, it's important to talk about two parts of this, right?
Sure.
You have conflagration and then you have the flare up mechanic.
Right.
So the flare up mechanic can be triggered by ignite. The other part is like a single target. It just like does slightly more damage.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Interesting. Huh. That's staying too in the expansion as far as I know. We'll have to see how that works. The fact that you have two of those exponential things in one tier, in one spec. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably being a little bit loose with my calling them exponential, but
Sure.
But you get the gist of it, right? There aren't many spells that work in that way in this game.
It makes me sort of salty a little bit because they took away my exponential in that way, Gar.
Oh, yeah.
Fire Nova.
You guys used to be the king, yeah.
Fire Nova.
Primal, holy
Yeah.
crap.
Can we get a moment of silence for Fire Nova? That's all we need. Yeah, ridiculous. So then, Nori, how about you walk us through Frost? And we'll leave Frost to last because of how much we talked about Frost, all the stuff leading up to this. Because I'm going to assume Frost has like one spec. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I mean, it's very simple. I don't need much time for this. So anyways, for the first tier, you pick Lonely Winter. For the second tier, you pick Shimmer. For the third tier, you pick Incanter's Flow. For the fourth tier, you pick Splitting Eyes. Then the next tier doesn't really matter. The tier after that, you pick Artigale. And finally, you pick Thermal Void. And that is the spec, pretty much. The only choices are if you want to do like rank 1 lock on single target fight, you pick Unstable Magic. But in any other case, that's not worth it. And when you are doing Mythic Varimatras, you pick Ice Flows. And yeah, that's it.
One more though. If
One
you're
more,
playing
yeah.
Agrimar and you're killing the ads, go Frozen Touch so you don't kill the ads on
Okay,
accident.
yeah.
But that's like
Oh,
you're actively making a decision. I want to do less damage. Like,
Sure.
That's so. At least we have a toggle there.
Gotcha. Yeah. Because Splitting Ice used to just be a glyph, right? But now it's a talent.
Mhm.
So you have to definitely have to work that one in for that. But I don't know. Damn it. I think Frostbomb was super fun from what I remember about it, but it doesn't work anymore
Rest
now,
in
right?
peace.
Well, Arctic Gale is just better because of your new artifact traits, right? With Blizzard interaction and even single target, that kind of stuff. Is that what happened here?
It's mostly because we got Freezing Rain, we got tier 22 piece and stuff like that.
Right.
Also,
Uh,
Frostbomb isn't Frostbolt, so it doesn't give you procs.
No,
Yeah, pretty much.
that's true.
Yeah, I mean the old Frostbomb, like from Mr. Pandaria, that was pretty fun. The one we got in Warlords, the rework, that I don't know. That's it's like a maintenance debuff that does nothing on its own, and you also have to cast it. It's not like instant, but it has 1.5 second cast time.
Yep.
I'm not a huge fan of that spell. It was okay at the start of Legion, where you got like Fingers of Frost every 2 seconds with your gloves, with your water elemental and stuff like that. So it was usable there, but after they nerfed the Fingers of Frost generation, it just wasn't really useful.
It was alright with
Yeah.
the old Frozen Orb too.
Yeah, the old Frozen also gave it a lot of power. Yeah, just one point that I'd like to mention, that when you look at like the Cookie Cutter build, it has all passive talents.
Yep.
And then you also have Lonely Winter, which actually reduces the amount of buttons you have.
Yep. Yeah, I know. That's what I was going to bring up again, sort of in the Arcane, like way about how you could spec that has other abilities that are neat. I mean, Comet Storm overall is probably just a numerical problem, and Glacial Spike has it looks freaking great. This spell looks way good. And then you also have Ray of Frost. You have like game changing or like or rotational changing abilities that could be really neat. And is that just a numerical problem that comes back down to this from, mythic rating standpoint, and they're fine outside of that? Or do they just not fundamentally work with like how Frost plays? Is that, I don't know which ballpark that's in more of.
Ray of Frost in particular, like if you are talking about talent usability, it's always a tuning problem, because you could just take a talent, increase its effect by 500%, and it would certainly be viable.
Sure.
Which is not really the point. And they had to do this with Ray of Frost like 3 times during Legion, because at the beginning of Legion, Ray of Frost was kind of usable. Then we started getting legendaries, and it faded because legendaries don't work with Ray of Frost unless you're talking about like Shard of Exorar. Then at the beginning of Nighthold, they increased the coefficients on Ray of Frost again, and that didn't really help. They tried, I think, once more, and nothing really. And the problem is that, yeah, as you said, this spell doesn't really work with the rest of the spec. If you take a look at it, it's just you sit there, you channel this thing for 10 seconds. It doesn't benefit from Shatter. It doesn't benefit from Fingers of Frost. It doesn't proc Fingers of Frost, Brain Freeze, anything. So you just sit there, do absolutely nothing. And meanwhile, you get Mastery, you get Crit, you get Haste. Well, Haste is actually good for Rare Frost, but the other stats are not that good. Crit is great for all the other spells that are not Rare Frost. Mastery doesn't work with Rare Frost at all. Then you also have your Artifact. We got new Artifact trades that do not work with Rare Frost, and so on. So pretty much everything works against Rare Frost, and that's very rare. It's pretty much the same deal with Ice Nova, though Ice Nova has some uses outside of raiding, because you can actually, it's a pretty neat way to shatter your Glacial Spikes, Ebon Balls. Well, Ebon Balls you can actually use Flurry, which is why it's sometimes, well, most of the time used in PvP, because it's instant, it does damage, it can shatter your big spells. But in raiding, it just does way too little. Frostbomb, same deal.
Yeah, and then Glacial Spike, what was the little...
Well, Glacial Spike is always like on the edge of almost being viable. I believe right now it's like 1 or 2% behind Thermal Void.
Sure.
But the main problem is, why would you pick Glacial Spike when you just can pick the passive, which does more damage, and you don't have to take care of it? Especially like when you are raiding, you get more time to pay attention to your mechanics instead of figuring out, okay, do I save my Brain Freeze proc when I have 3 Icicles or 4 Icicles, and stuff like that. So there's really no point. Like, if you want to spice up your rotation and you are not worried about 1 or 2% damage loss, then yeah, go take it. I don't think like the talent is it's not optimal, but I would say it is viable.
It's always weird where, I mean, this is like always a math thing that everyone always figures out, and there's a back and forth on if like spell activated talent should be like the best choice. Oh, lost Preheat, and he destroyed my, there we go. Because if all the activated talents, the ones that actually add gameplay or interactions or whatever, are the better ones, then that becomes probably too many buttons to min-max, right? Because there's like a soft spot where like 4 to 6 feels good, because in your Spiral Hunter that had like 9 doesn't feel very good. So there's obviously a back and forth on that. But it's just unfortunate to see when really interesting spell ideas or rotational changes or talent choices are just not the best, but then just get kind of downvoted into oblivion by the community that plays with them because they're just not good enough to use.
Well, yeah, so like they make really cool spells that like have a really cool place in the game.
Yeah.
And then they're like, wait a second, people are having fun.
Oh, go on.
With Glacial Spike, right? Like Glacial Spike was great because you could take any damage increase and make it just way better, right? Like you would use it in a situation where, you know, damage would be amped as long as it was the damage that you're doing, not the damage that they're taking. I think that was right. Do I have that backwards, or is that Frosted? Do you remember if it's one way or the other?
It's target-based multipliers.
Okay, I remember that it works in one way and not in the other. But anyways,
how did Maiden work? It was a player-based multiplier. Yeah, player-based.
Yeah, I think it has to be player-based for it to work. Yeah, I don't know. It's been a long time. But so like it was really cool in those situations because you got to like go ham, right? Like I remember in Ian on Xavius, I did like a 65 million Glacial Spike, and it cleaved the ad for like a portion of that damage too. It was great, really fun. And then they decided, oh, you're having too much fun with this. This is obviously not how we intended the spell to work. Let's nerf it, and now no one plays it anymore. So it's like they take the flavor out of the spice, and then no one's going to use the spice anymore unless you really just are in love with that spice.
Yeah. That's the unfortunate...
I mean, this is like the same issue that we had with Thermal Void back before the patch that nerfed it, which was like 725 or something like that. Is that the spell is fun to play because obviously like doing 80 million Glacial Spike back in Emerald Nightmare where people were doing at most like few million. And the same issue with Thermal Void where we get 2-second extension and you can get like infinite ice events. They are fun to play, but they really limit the design space. So if you actually want to move the spec forward, you want to do something interesting, you cannot have these spells around. It's a shame for us players, but if you actually want to get new cool stuff, that's what we have to sacrifice.
Right. No, it always comes back in this design circle we bring up on every single show about this too, and it's only the first build, so much will change. But the first groans happened at least in my little corner of WoW with enhancement because they removed some and replaced some things with just these passives. There's so many passives in the enhancement tree now. It's just I don't know what. I guess that's fine, but passives of 3 different flavors don't really change how anything happens in the game. They just exist. So I always think that's unfortunate.
The other side is pretty bad too, though. Like, I mean, we kind of complain about the actives not being tuned very well, but would you really want to play Ray of Frost, Rune of Power, Ice Nova, Frost Bomb, Glacial Spike?
Hell yeah, dude.
Would you really want to balance all of that? Because I did in the beginning of the expansion, and I was like, this sucks. Like it's a nightmare to juggle all of those things and actually get them all working correctly. So I think there's definitely a balancing act between how many actives you have and how those actives like come about in your rotation. And Frost just has way too many actives that you have to press like semi regularly and are also like long cast times or cast time things. And it's just, even if they were tuned right, it wouldn't work well.
Yeah. I definitely don't envy the job of the class designer, spec designer, talent people, the math people that actually make all this stuff work, because they have a really challenging time with how the new talent system works, because normally like the new paradigm is a passive, a semi-active or a proc, and then a spell. And that's how almost all these DPS tiers look like, right? It's not usually 3 different passives or 3 different spells, but I almost wonder if they need to change that style to give, because the original thought when they brought these in MOP was that some of these talents might be incredibly overpowered, but you only get to pick one of them out of a row of 3 overpowered talents. And that still never really hit the mark, I don't feel. Because it still just comes down to just numerically, one of these is always just the best. Or the best to play with, or the best that actually works with the core design of the class, and other ones are just kind of just like...
Yeah, I think the best they can do is make them like situationally the best. Like I think Fire's a good example of how they've done that right.
It's true.
I would like to see more of that variety in the other specs. Like I know that they don't want you to like change your spec for each boss and just have the best one for the boss, but like, okay, but that's how the game is tuned, right? So
yeah,
I don't know, just lean into that. Like, let's
what's
let Frostbomb own an AoE. Like, I don't know.
The reverse of that is that you could play enhancement, and I literally haven't changed my spec in a tier and a half. So what's the better rationale? Never changing your talents. The whole point of talents is supposed to be like a movable system, or at least have some variation in options per encounter type. So, yeah. But
yeah,
I think like this is probably the best solution, because it is very hard to get the talents to be like within 0.5% of each other, as we have seen. Even if it's like you get slightly different stats, and then suddenly the talent balance is all over the place. So maybe instead of trying to do this, is okay. So we will have one talent that's clearly the best, but only for the situation, and another one which is clear the best for the situation. So you can actually have some choice, even though it's not like for one encounter, but overall the encounters in the raid, which is probably like better than just having one option which is numerically the strongest option and just not changing it ever.
Yeah, it's better than having a spell that they put all this work into that you just never cast the whole expansion, right? Like, how many of you out there have ever cast Blast Wave this whole expansion?
Probably I'm doing it while leveling because it looks cool.
Okay, yeah.
Damn it.
That's like the point, right? Like, like it's just a fact that like right now you cannot expect tuning to be where they want it to be, where everything is great and you just choose whatever you want, right? That's just not gonna happen. So just lean into the fact that spells are going to be better for AoE and single target and different situations, and then we can have fun and actually use these spells.
Chat brings up, remember actually seeing water elementals? You still use water elemental in PvP though, I think, don't you? For Frost Mage, you want the extra control, but I have zero PvP knowledge. I have no idea.
I'm
Wow,
glad he's gone.
PvP.
I hate the water lily.
No.
Yo, fuck out of here.
You can give him the new skin, the glyph skin, and then you make him tiny.
Yeah, but you can't make him not be stupid.
Oh,
He's just so
No, you
dumb.
can,
I just
you
want to
can.
shake him.
I think like the main problem is that there are some quality of life improvements that need to happen.
Yeah.
First of all, we just should get the glyph like from Warlord's baseline, which made the elemental be able to cause while moving and just follow you all around, so that you don't ever get into the situation. Okay, so I want to use my water jet, I want to use my freeze, and the water elemental is just not there. It got stuck on an obstacle or whatever. Like if you try to use water elemental, for example, on Elisand or maybe the Helia platform, it just gets stuck somewhere. And
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, like I remember there being situations in the last expansion. What was the name of Warlords of Draenor? Yeah, where my
Wow.
water Ellie would just like start casting spells on the target that was like 200 yards away, and it like none of it made any sense, and he would just like pull the whole instance in like the mythics I was doing, like weird crap that he does. Like I don't know, spaghetti, I guess. So that's the only explanation.
I don't know, I
They've
think he's like a unique aspect of Frost that the other specs don't. They can't even talent into, right?
sure.
So I like it.
It's weird because they fixed fire elemental and storm elemental for elemental shaman. Like it actually forcibly follows you. Moving with fire elemental out lowers its damage because it'll stop casting and chase you, right? Like if I'm moving because I play elemental for Coven, and because who plays melee on that fight, and I will gust of wind to move to a safe zone, and the fire elemental just stops across the platform and sits next to me and then starts casting again. So. But water elemental will sit there and like stop, or it'll attack a different sister, I guess, or just not. Whatever. I don't know why it's weird, but yeah, probably spaghetti.
I don't know. I miss water jet. That's the main thing. Like I just want water jet. The rest of it can just go away.
That's gone right now too, right? Isn't water jet anymore?
Well, you can't because you don't run the
You
pet.
don't
I mean,
have
you
water.
could.
Sure, that's what I mean. Yeah, it
You
just
could,
like,
but you won't.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Waterjet has a bunch of its own issues.
Yeah.
I know. That's why I like it.
oh,
Water jet on like Helia was pretty rough.
Yeah, because the timing depends on how much haste you have, how far the target is, and it's kind of hard to get right. So I'm hoping they like increase the margin for error. For example, increase the channel time by 50%, limit the charges you get at 2, so you can use it earlier, a bit later, and still get like your 2 charges. You'll see.
So walk me through sort of mage hierarchy then, sort of wrap up everything we've been going over right now. And with the pure DPS specs, right? So always go over this when we do warlocks, hunters, rogues, and mages. There's going to be design faults and issues and pitfalls here and there, depending on which spec, which Legion's whole philosophy was, if you want to play Fire Mage, just play Fire Mage. That's the interview that Sleuthbag and I did back at the Legion Summit. You can go find it on the YouTube channel where we have Ian quoted that if you play Fire in Legion, you probably just keep playing Fire the whole time, which that didn't happen because Fire was good and they nerfed it. And then no one played Fire until recently, right? So there's always one spec that sort of gets left behind or left out. And has Mage and Legion been okay with this? It seems like you've bounced around to all 3 specs intermittently, which I think is a good like analytic point. But Frosted, what's the whole Mage community zeitgeist sort of figured out going in to now with how like is just play Frost Mage all the time?
I would say you should, like, for right now, or you're talking about across all of Legion, because you talked about both things.
Just both things. What started as and what it is now, I suppose.
So I mean, what it is now, you can play, like, you can just play Frost, right? Frost does well enough in Mythic content and rating content on every fight that you really don't have to worry about switching specs if you really don't want to. I think there can be an argument made for fire, except on Agrimar, like Preheat brought up earlier, that fire would be fine too. I think Arcane. I mean, I wouldn't play Arcane.
Arcane is
I
like
wouldn't play
survival
Arcane.
spec for hunters. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think like numerically it's bad, and there are definitely fights where it's good on, like Iminar. But I think that the way the spec plays and the way like the ebb and flow of burning and conserving works in raiding right now, and how fragile like running double ring is, which is your best legendary setup, I wouldn't raid with it. And I think that's been the case for pretty much the entire expansion, right? Like Arcane is sort of the out spec all expansion. There was never a tier where you're all like, yeah, like definitely go Arcane. Like no one ever said that.
Yeah, so in the perspective of Legion, right? Like Legion is, well, I guess until recently, it's been an expansion where you pretty much put all your bread in one basket, right?
Sure.
Like you have to go all in with one, especially if you aren't looking to play the game for a long time, having to farm up that stuff. So if you were to just have to choose one, that kind of changes things, right? Like I think a mix of Fire and Frost is like the best one. But if you only have time to go for one, yeah, I'd probably, unless you really like to do dungeons, I'd probably go Frost for everything.
Yeah. Which I guess that's fine, because Blizzard openly said that was one of their design stances going into this expansion, that if you wanted to play one spec, you should be able to play that one. The barring point of that was fixed recently with artifact power to make it much easier, as was just supposed to like legendaries. Just because that's how the system was, that if you didn't play the same spec forever, you never got legendaries for it. So yeah, that's the biggest barrier to entry, where you were stuck playing one spec, and if you chose wrong, oh well, I guess. I mean, the top guilds, I mean, I don't know if Limit did this a lot at the beginning of the expansion, where you would roll the same class multiple times to see what your first legendary was, and if it was a good one,
yeah.
that was your main.
Yeah, that was the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually have a guy who's still playing his alt because you know, he hasn't gotten off of it since. So
yeah. So that's a weird point. Well, obviously that's changing in battle. The necklace is across all three specs. The artifact power system, or the Azerite power system, AP version 2.0, is passive. It just loots to you when you do things. Just goes, and it works on across all three. So that's amazing. Oh, geez. But was there... I put on here about Mythic Plus dungeons. That's a huge part of the game right now. Is there any points that you want to bring up about Mythic Plus? Is it probably just fire most of the time, though, right? I mean, now, high keys, or is like the AoE of Arcane, depending on the key, better than fire or frost in that regard? Because I don't know what hierarchy you guys have at Mythic Plus. I don't know who wants to tackle that.
So it all depends on like how high of a key you're doing.
Sure.
Because often in Mythic Plus, as you get to higher keys, it's not so much about what has the damage output that you need. It's about what will make me not die.
Yeah.
And especially in specific instances, you just simply cannot play Arcane. Because in order to AoE, you would have to enter melee. And if you even go closer than 40 yards, you're going to die instantly. I'm talking about Blackrock Hold. So in situations like this, Arcane really falls flat on its face because we don't have a way for us to do the same AoE damage that we need to be doing without having to basically go kill ourselves in melee. Because you're a clothy and you're walking into like a blender that's like OSHA would not approve of. So basically, yeah, fire is going to be the way to go in most situations. Obviously, there's always exceptions. It all depends on the key you're running, what dungeon, what your group is. A lot of stuff goes into this. But I would say a safe bet for everything would be fire.
Okay. And that's a pretty straight answer, I guess. Now, is there... I guess... That's about it, I think, I have for the notes. Chad, if you have questions, you can sort of weave them in here toward the end of the show. We can sort of pick apart some questions you may or may not have about Frost, Fire, and Arcane. But, because that's... Mage has always had this one spec feels the best, always. But then one spec left behind... Which I guess is the problem. All of them have that, right? Warlock has that with Destruction, almost all the expansion, except for like 2 fights. Demonology now has this weird stigma about it. And then Rogue had either Combat into Outlaw, being like, but I guess that's just how it's going to be for the pures. We'll see how hunters feel next. I mean, hunters are going to dunk all over survival except outside of Tomb of Sargeras where it was fine. So we will definitely see.
I mean, I don't think Arcane should be dunked on. Like its numbers are fine, right? Like its numbers are okay. I just think that the way it plays is not great.
Okay.
And like when you can play Frost, if you're really wanting to be competitive, right?
Yeah. So here's
why put yourself through that? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Arcane guys like who do like Arcane, they do fine, and you can do good damage with it. But you're gonna have to work a lot harder, and probably have to like have a better understanding of how Arcane slots into a fight, and that's fight specific timings and mechanics than you would as like a Frost Mage or a Fire Mage.
Right now, the specs are actually like insanely close. If we're just talking about doing single target damage, like probably the best it's been in a very long time. The differences are mainly just in the playstyle things. Like, why would you want to play Arcane when you could play Frost, like Frost had said, and do probably a little better, same.
There's a couple of questions that come up in chat that are very guidey oriented. If you're asking about like relics or artifact stuff or anything about that, obviously Ultra Time or the Discord's going to have those, because we're not going to go into guidey oriented things, which brings to the first question. And I'll go to, well, it's my left, camera right, to Nori over here because he does a lot of math. How much should a mage charge for a portal?
I think the more you charge, the better. So 1,000 gold. Probably.
Oh, okay.
No, you see, the pro market has been completely flipped on its head ever since those dang portal keepers came and took away all our jobs, making portals to all the towns free.
Wow.
We've been all out of work, you know, and now we can't even sell our conjured food anymore. It's horrible. The whole economy has crashed.
Well, maybe that'll be
tighter. This is where I go on a like build that wall rant. No,
I was gonna say we're gonna put the wall up.
It won't work. They can make portals.
That's true. Shit.
Oh gosh. Let me see. What is this? There was a few other here. I mean, I like picking up like the funny questions at the end because you guys do all the real ones all the time. What product, if any, does Preheat use? I would assume on his hair.
So it's a secret, so I'm gonna kind of whisper it. Whatever my wife uses. Don't repeat that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You don't want any. You don't want to pick any of the serious questions.
Oh, you know, if you see one, then you can definitely go for it. That was the 735 bug fix one that I saw there.
Talking about the hot streak bug.
Yeah, addressed in 735 bug fix resulted in a 3% DPS loss that Blizzard hasn't addressed at all. Hasn't got any compensation for, even though fire is pretty much bottom of the pack. I would assume of mages. I don't think it's bottom of the pack. Period. To Warcraft
it
logs.
Hurt.
What was the fix?
When you cast, so basically when you cast hot streaked pyroblast, if another pyroblast was in flight, you could flag both of them as being hot streaked. So you could say cast a pyroblast bracer pyroblast, it's in flight, and then you cast immediately after that a hot streaked pyroblast. It makes both of them benefit from hot streak, which gives you a 200% multiplier on ignite, or makes ignite do 200% damage. So that's like a 3 to 5% damage gain because it's trivial to do. Like you can do it without even knowing it, and we were doing it without even knowing it for a really long time. And obviously, bracer buff is worth a lot of damage. Those pyroblasts hit really hard, so the ignite from that is pretty substantial. So that ended up being like a 3 to 5% DPS nerf.
So they nerfed the fact that they both don't count then? Is that what you mean? Is that what?
Yeah, so they're not supposed to count. It's only supposed to be the pyroblast that's cast with the buff.
Sure.
And this was making it so that any other pyroblast in flight at the same time had it, right? Or not any other pyroblast details. But basically you were giving pyroblasts that shouldn't be ignite buffs.
Or flame strike, yeah.
Or flame strike World War II.
Weird.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean it was definitely weird. Why they haven't addressed the throughput issue? Probably because it's the end of the expansion and the raid tier is pretty close to being over. It's not like a gigantic problem like Rogues had where they were using an AoE talent or an AoE spell for their main throughput, right? Like
right.
Which is like degenerate and a really big issue. So they're probably just like, it's the end of the expansion. Who cares?
I'm looking at. I'm just side screening here real quick to some Warcraft logs to see. I mean, people might think this is a weird thing, and this is a side series that I might be putting together about this. That every 2 weeks I will make a discussion video about Warcraft logs to help satisfy the community's understanding or misunderstanding of how logs look and how percentiles look. But like, so Fire Mage at 50th percentile Mythic is 79%. And I'm not going to include Affliction or Windwalker monks in this because they get a lot of nonsense in inflating logs based on multi-dotting and mostly Windwalker monks on Kingaroth. So that doesn't really count. So like the top DPS in the 50% Mythic is 88%. So that's less than a 10% disparity top to bottom for that, which is amazing considering that balance last expansion was horrendous in comparison to this one. Yeah. So like I think between up to 15% top to bottom variance is actually fine. It's when you were in Warlords and it's like 28% top to bottom. That's disgusting. So
yeah, I think that what you're talking about is why people are not happy.
Well, sure.
When you have all differences between the top and the bottom, shakeups that are like 3 to 4%. I mean, it's not really a small difference, but when you have reasonable balance compared to the past between the specs, and then you get a 3% nerf, you drop quite a bit. Like your bar goes below a lot of other bars, and people hate that shit.
No, I that makes sense.
Even if the numbers are reasonable, if their bar is lower than other bars, people are going to get mad, and that's exactly what it is, right?
I understand.
Their bar is going below other bars.
Yep. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's so weird how Arcane. This is. I love looking at this kind of stuff because it shows how different fights are. Arcane is the lowest at 50 percentile heroic, but Arcane is the best mage at 50 percentile mythic.
Well, yeah, Arcane's not easy.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Yeah.
And 50th percentile, like, yeah. So like heroic mages are going to be fucking up. Like the margin of error for playing double ring Arcane is exceptionally small.
Sure.
If you miscue even a few 4-stack Arcane Charge, Arcane Blasts, you're losing huge amounts of your mana pool. And if you're just throwing away mana to the point where you're out of mana when you need to burn, that's pretty bad. And easy to do if you're not good. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I didn't interrupt. I was just saying, Renoa, we talked about Frost for almost like 15 minutes about the momentum-based playstyle of Frost and the other section of the show. So I'm not going to bring us back to the Frost madness, because it's the future DPS through lack of cooldown reduction through Icy Veins, losing chain reaction stacks. I mean, I wouldn't, if you're talking about battle, don't, because we're 7 months away from that at least, I would say. So plenty is going to change, but in that regard.
Someone asked if I liked Concerned Frog. I like Concerned Frog a lot. Definitely good.
It's a good question.
I don't know what he is, but I see him everywhere.
He's everywhere, but I like it. I don't know.
Just everyone just stop posting frogs.
I'm concerned if you don't like Concerned
frogs.
Frog. All right,
but
I'm concerned frog. You don't like Concerned Frog.
I thought he wasn't a frog though.
I don't know.
He's like
he seems frog-like. I'm just done with the frogs. No more frogs.
That's fair. But yeah, leaving Phoenix Flames aside, is Ebb and Bolt or other traits not worth keeping? And how about Arcane? I think you're talking about things that a spec could lose and be okay with. Because I don't think we've seen any Ebb and Bolt staying around in the battle stuff. Mark of Alaneth is definitely not there, I don't think. Phoenix Flames is in the first battle build. I'm not sure. I think everyone's going to feel a little bit gutted because we know it's a downsized expansion. But are there anything that you think like Frost and Arcane need to keep to still work properly?
I'm pretty sure that both Ebon Vault and Mark of Alaneth are not like crucial parts of Arcane Frost Mages right now, unlike Phoenix Flame from for Fire.
Mm-hmm.
The thing the stuff that Frost should keep from the artifact is probably some reason to keep shattering your Frostbolts when you are doing the Frostbolt Flurry Icelands combo, because you are losing Chain Reaction and Frozen Veins, which I do not think like these are good traits because they work with any old Frostbolt crits, so it promotes Frostbolt spam. But if you actually had something like when you shatter your Frostbolt, you do X, that would work much better. Then we probably need to keep Freezing Rain because Freezing Rain is the best thing to come out of the Frost artifact. So I'm hoping we keep that one. Icy Hand would be nice, which is the +1 to Fingers of Frost stacks. And I would also like to keep something like Shield of Elodai because Iceberry is, for me, I think like it is the best when it's around 30% of your max HP, where it doesn't feel overpowered, but it doesn't feel inconsequential.
Okay.
Yeah, and also keeping the physical damage reduction on Blazing Barrier, just because that is the only real use of that spell, right? Is to reduce like one big physical hit coming your way. So if that goes out, then it's like, why am I even casting this spell?
Yeah, and for Arcane, I took a quick glance at the artifact, and I think the only thing that will be missed, which is not just like some bunch of numbers, is probably going to be the 4 extra yards on Arcane Explosion. I cannot think really of anything else.
Yeah, I mean, that's a... I mean, Preheat brought up walking into melee, and you walk into melee right now, and Arcane Explosion is actually a much wider range than it's going to be coming back to a much smaller... Yeah. Uh-oh. That's a good one. But, I don't think there's anything else that popped up. Was there any other questions that you guys thought? I mean, because you can instead of turn this around if you want some soapbox time. I think
someone asked if we're content with the current problem of proc munching with Frost, with respect to Brain Freeze and Fingers of Frost.
Okay, I mean,
and I would say no, and that was also one of the reasons why I suggested Flurry as a charge-based spell, so that you don't have these overlapping procs occurring on Frostbolt, which you can do nothing about.
Yeah,
Right.
this also solves another big issue because when you have charge-based Flurry, you can cast Ice Lance first and then cast your Flurry. You are not penalized for dumping your Fingers of Frost first.
Yep.
Oh. That'd be a cool back and forth A or B decision-making process too, instead of right now you're locked into you have to do this before this. Yeah.
And another thing too, it may not be too big in raid, but like for leveling, Cauterizing Blink will be sorely missed.
Oh.
Yeah, true.
I didn't think of that one. Yeah, there's a couple of little ones like that you're wondering, because we're all prepared for this downsize. It has to be, not only just numerically and stat squish or whatever, but we're losing a lot of these passive possibilities that we'll feel when they're not there anymore. We were used to them now, but how about some shout outs and some soapboxing? You can close the show out real quick here. And we'll go back to Nori first for this one. Do you have anyone you want to throw some shout outs out to help you with SimC, or anything you want to soapbox and slightly rant about with mages? This is your time. Go for it.
Well, I think this came up in this chat that I should probably mention. When I was talking about Frostburn, as it would be like the best fit for the new Frost Mastery or the old Mastery. You can actually solve a lot of problems in this way because, first of all, it works with Winter's Chill. The effect doesn't have to be as big because precisely you have Winter's Chill to apply Shatter in more places. But you can also make it relevant for AoE when you, for example, let's say a Frozen Orb now always deals damage as if the targets are frozen, and now the stat just scales pretty well even when you are doing AoE. So you could fix like a lot of issues with current mastery just by doing these two little changes. And as for shoutouts, well, of course, I'd like to shout out to my SimC colleagues, everyone who is doing SimC work, all the Mage theory crafters, and I should also specifically call shout out for Dikembe, who is doing the Arcane APL work and also some SimC work. Okay, yeah, I think that is it from me.
Awesome. Definitely. I don't know if it was a joke or people were poking fun at your guild or people that are from your guild are watching, but no shout outs to your guild though, right? Nothing? No.
I mean, I can give you shout outs, but I don't think they are super relevant to this show. But sure, let's go ahead and give shout outs to all my guild members for raiding with me and giving me loot.
Sounds good. Frosted, how about you? What do you want to, any shout outs or soapbox time? Go for it.
Yeah, shoutouts to Gloonie for taking over the SimC dump threads and making it so that I don't have to do that anymore.
Okay, yeah.
To Dikembe for doing Arcane, even though he doesn't even play the spec. RIP
Wow.
your guild, dude. But I appreciate your work. And to my guild for taking me along for another tier. You know, taking me into Battle for Azeroth. Things continue to go well.
That's fair. I think he was in chat, right, about Arcane. Is that why you had to do the shout out for it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah. Sounds good. Preheat, last up, sir. Go for it. Yeah, there's Dikembe right there.
Yeah, just shout out to everyone on the concerned server who's, you know, propagating that frog in the chat. Appreciate it. No, but for real though, the community for mages is really, really awesome. I think it is an important point to bring up. If you play another class, and I'm not just saying this because I only play mage, like I play other classes too, and I've experienced the other communities, and I just think we have the best one. It's the amount of information that's out there is great. The accuracy of the information is something that you get used to, and you may start to appreciate and maybe take for granted if you're to play something else. So you really have to appreciate the fact that these guys do so much work, and they want to keep this stuff up to date and accurate. And it I don't know, it'd be hard for me to play another class after getting so spoiled by the mage community. So I really appreciate it, you guys, especially you two, because you're here, but everyone else as well.
That's fair enough. That sounds good to me. But that'll about wrap it up right here. Let's push this button, and there it is. So thank everyone for tuning in to episode number 164. It's the Mage Ketchup episode for Legion's patch 735. Again, the Patreon version of the show, the after show, we're going to sit down after this show and just rant and ramble for a little bit. That'll go up online there. But around the table yet again, there's Preheat. You go follow him on Twitter and then watch his streams, and then make sure you comment on his hair and what he uses for his hair care products.
Don't watch me for any World of Warcraft. I don't play that game anymore. Monster Hunter World is the game that I'm playing. So if you want to see Monster Hunter World, then watch me. Otherwise,
what are you talking about? Beta comes out in like a week or two. Psh.
what is it even called? Battle for, I don't know.
Battle for Monsters Hunter.
I'm busy right now.
It is Monster Hunter. Well, thank you again for your time, sir. It's a pleasure as always. Thank you very much. And then there's Frosted. You can go poke altered-time.com, of course, or jump in their Discord and see all the work that they put together. Awesome stuff. And again, thank you for your time on the show, sir. Even though you're in darkness now.
Yeah, no, the sun's gone down, so there's not like a blazing light coming in from the back.
Yeah.
I do invite though. It's always a pretty good time.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. And then I think he didn't make all the EU mages mad, but there's Nori. You can go poke him on Discord and see all the work he does on the SimC APL and just going forward. Thank you very much for being the fresh meat on the show today, sir. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for the invitation.
So that's going to do it. Again, Hunters will be our last pure DPS spec on next Sunday. And if you've missed any part of this show, of course, you can go grab the whole thing on YouTube, or VOD's available here on the channel for subscribers, and then YouTube, or the audio-only version on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play Music for MP3 version. If you want to put that in here while you're going somewhere, go for that. But again, after that, we'll see when battle shapes up to see if we're going to be doing more catch-up shows for Legion or not. Depends on that, because obviously doing shows on Legion becomes sort of when we can test the new expansion. So I'll keep you up to date on that one. Of course, you can follow the show on social medias down below, or YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, etc. But I will see you all here next Sunday. Have a great rest of your week. Trusting your seal of artifact power. Get that 75 done and then forget about it. Then go play Monster Hunter, I guess.
That's
or
right.
Yeah, see? Yeah. There it is. But until next week, everybody. Bye! Oh, bye. Wave.
Bye.
Wave bye, nice people. Wave. Wave
Okay,
bye.
well, bye.
There you go. There. We did it. Woo!
There you go. We got it.